Fusion Mobile, quality e-learning experience on the go.
Good day everyone, and you're welcome to Fusion Mobile e-learning platform. My name is Jacob Uchenna, and you're welcome to a study session on economics. Today we'll be studying the theory of production. Many a time, production is something a whole lot of people misinterpret to mean different things, but here we want to actually look at production as the economist sees it. Production has been defined as the transformation of raw materials to finished goods by certain authors, but much more comprehensively, production is the creation of goods and services to satisfy human wants. Now, that is, in that, we have seen that production has to do with transformation of raw materials to finished goods, and also making sure that these goods are available to satisfy human wants when and where they are needed. Another school of thought says that production is the creation of utility, where utility is the ability of a commodity to satisfy human wants. Now, going by that, it means production adds utility to any kind of material or anything. So in other words, utility, as in a particular study session we talked about utility, we looked at three forms of utility: form, time, and place utility. Those utilities are added at different stages of production. We'll be taking a look at that in a short while. Now, like we said, production is the creation of goods and services for the satisfaction of human wants. Now, to do that, when production has taken place, it must get to the final consumer before we say production is complete. The process of production is never complete until goods produced are consumed. When you have just manufactured products and you leave it in the factory, then such production process is not complete, because eventually it will lead to a clog and a glut in the market, and definitely the producer won't be able to, the manufacturer won't be able to manufacture any longer because there's no consumption taking place. So consumption is a vital part of production. Now, moving down, when products are produced, some products are produced after processing are ready for consumption, while some are not. Goods that are ready for consumption are called finished goods or consumer goods. So any kind of product that when after production or processing it is readily available for consumption, then we call that producer goods. Consumer goods or finished goods. Now, there are some other things are called intermediate goods. Intermediate goods are also called capital goods. Some schools of thought refer to it as unfinished goods. Well, intermediate or capital goods are goods that are needed for production of other goods or commodities. For instance, talking about cement, sand, stone, they are all required so that they can be used to make construct things like roads, houses, buildings, bridges, and so on. Now, that is talking about the types of goods. We have producer goods, we have or capital goods, we also have consumer goods or finished goods. Now, the next item on the list here, we have the types of production. Production is classified into two types of production. Production is classified into two types. You have the direct production, and the indirect production. Now, the direct production is actually referred to as subsistence production. Subsistence production is more like a kind of production that involves direct consumption by the producer of whatever that has been produced. That means that it is a system or a type of production where the producer produces for his own consumption and not for income generation. In other words, the producer in direct production is the consumer. So the consumer and the producer are the same. And that is why it's referred to as subsistence production. Direct production is the same as subsistence production. Then, for indirect production is a type of production wherein the producer produces for others. He produces for commercial purposes using different methods or different labors and so on and so forth. For direct production here, since he's a subsistence at the subsistence level, output is usually low. The method of production is usually crude, and the output, the labor required, the factors employed are usually self-provided. Now, the next one that we were talking about, the indirect production, we say it involves production for income generation or for commercial purposes. In other words, it means that for indirect production, that is where we can talk about commercialized kind of production that has to do with different continuous manufacturing, and some other cases, job shops. When we say job shop, it means job and batch production. When we talk about job and batch production, is a kind of indirect production, still at the small scale level, but in which case the output of production is fashioned to the customer's specification. That means the consumer determines what the output would look like. Then, after that, we talk about the other types of production under indirect production. We have the continuous process production, or we call the continuous production. Now, for continuous production, the producer actually produces continuously in anticipation of future demand. That means he doesn't produce for anybody specifically, but so as to satisfy the consumer's needs. The producer in this case makes use of specialized machines that will enable him to actually come out with large volumes of output. So in other words, for the indirect production, especially the continuous process production, we have large outputs, large scale of production, application of machines, and division of labor. Now that does it for types of production. Now we take a look at stages of production. Stages or forms of production. We refer to it as stages or forms of production. Now, the stages of production are three. We have the primary production, secondary production, and tertiary. Primary production, secondary production, and tertiary production. Now, looking at these three, they all follow sequentially, in a sequential order, that one must come before the other. For instance, the primary stage must be completed before the secondary, then before the tertiary. Now, what are these things? Before I tell you, a few questions will come up on your screen and you take a look at them and we'll be back. So you're welcome back. Now, before the break we were talking about the stages of production. Now, straight on to that, the primary production stage refers to the type or stage of production, the form of production, which involves the extraction or bringing out of raw materials from the source or from where they existed. Now, these kind of things involve activities of the extractive industry, such as you have mining, quarrying, lumbering, fishing, farming, etc. Now, those things that actually bring out things from land or from the natural habitat or the natural resource, the things where they exist on land, that is, those activities belong to a primary stage of production. For the secondary stage of production, it is the stage of production or the form of production that makes use of the raw materials obtained from the primary stage and processes them or refines them into finished products. Now, activities like this add form utility to a product, that is, the kind of satisfaction which the product will yield because it has been reconstructed or changed in form. Now, in that case, secondary production, making the activities that could be involved during secondary production, we have things like what? Assembling and construction. We also have refining and manufacturing. While some of these things depend on the kind of thing you produce, some others actually are generic. For instance, when you refine, some other cases, you don't just refine food items or processed food items. You also refine things like mineral resources, such as coal, crude oil, and other things. But when you assemble and you construct is more like a permanent change, while assemblage is like a temporal thing, because in assembling is more like a process of construction, or a process a process in which the components used to make up the finished good or the entity can be gotten. All right, that means the entity can be dismantled with the components recovered. But in construction, they cannot be recovered the way they were taken in. So those are activities involved in secondary production. But for tertiary production, things like any set of activities which actually makes sure that the goods or services get from where they are produced to where they are needed belong to the tertiary production. Now, the tertiary production, therefore, looks at the different services which ensure that the goods produced get to the final consumer, since production, like we said earlier, is not complete until goods get to the final consumer. Then, the next part of it, the activities that could be involved here include commercial activities, distributive activities, and trade. Now, the next point on our outline says to look at factors of production. Factors of production. of production. Factors of production, also referred to as agents of production. Agents of production, or we can call them requisites of production. Either of these serve for factors of production. Now, looking at this, the factors of production are those items, those components that must be present for actual production, for production to take place. The different components, the different things that need to be present that for actual production, for production to start and for it to be completed. Now, we have 4 of them. The factors of production or agents of production. We have land, we have labor, we have capital, and there's the entrepreneur. We'll pick them one after the other. Land is a free gift of nature, and mostly the premises on which production must take place. Now, land in economics is not seen as just the solid part of the earth, but also the things that are embedded in them, which means that anything that is freely given by nature, such as waterways, such as wildlife, vegetation, mineral resources, all are regarded as land. Now, land has certain characteristics which are as follows. Number 1, land, like we said, is a free gift of nature, has certain characteristics which are as follows. So the characteristics of land include, number 1, land is a free gift of nature. It is fixed in supply. Three, it has no production. Land has no production costs. Four, it is subject to diminishing returns. Five, the reward for land is rent. Land varies in value. From place to place. And these are certain characteristics of things we would refer to as land. The first one is that it's a free gift of nature, which one is that it is not man-made. And while it is not man-made, you pay nothing to bring it into existence. Then it is fixed in supply, meaning that land cannot be increased nor decreased. The quantity of land cannot be increased nor decreased. Now, the third one we have that we say that it has no production cost, which means that no one can produce it. The fourth one, it is subject to the diminishing returns. We'll be much more conversant with diminishing return later in this study session, but to give us an idea of what we are talking about, when we talk about something diminishing, it talks about reduction in value of production or output from it. when we say land is subject to diminishing return, it means that you actually use land up to a point where it actually, if it is not properly managed, instead of giving you higher outputs of higher volume of production, it will be giving you less volume of production. Now, the next one we'll talk about that we have here is that the reward for land is rent. That is, whatever you pay for land, for the use of land, is referred to as economic rent. Commercial rent. I meant to say, not economic rent. And the next one, that land varies in value from place to place, which means that the things that you can get on land depends on the climate of the area where it is found or located. Now, the last thing that is not there is that land is a fixed factor. Is a fixed factor of production. What that means is that land does not change with the production process. It is fairly stable. In fact, it is almost permanently stable. Now, that is about land. Now, the next factor of production we have is labor. Labor as a factor of production is looked at as every human effort, every skill that is directed towards the production of goods and services, right? Directed towards making sure that goods and services are produced and they are taken to the consumers. Every kind of skill that or effort man makes, that is, human beings make towards the actualization of the production process, then we refer to that as labor. Now, labor could have certain types because of the skill. You have skilled labor, and we have the unskilled labor. Now, looking at these two things, skilled labor refers to the type of labor which involves the mental abilities, mostly the mental abilities of man, for the activities or production activities to take place. Now, the skill in this case takes quite a long period of training and possibly education to acquire. And it involves high mentally tasking activities such as accounting, such as engineering, and so on and so forth. Now, that leads us to the second one, which referred to as unskilled labor. Unskilled labor is a type of labor which the skill requires little or no training to acquire, and it involves a higher physical effort of man than mental. In other words, when we talk about unskilled labor, we are looking at artisan activities that do not actually involve the use of so much mental ability. Just little of the mental capacity is enough. So it involves most of the word handiwork. Now, moving down from there, that's types of labor. From types of labor, we have the characteristics. Now, labor in itself is a variable factor. It is a variable factor. Factor of production. Two, it is highly mobile. It's highly mobile. Three, It involves human ability for ownership cannot be separated from skill. Next one, the reward for labor is wages or salaries. Now, these factors or these points make up the characteristics of labor as a factor of production. And the first one here, we have that it is a variable factor of production, meaning that labor can change in both volume and quality and size, and the kind of skill required varies from stage to stage of production as the production process progresses. Now, the next one, talking about what? That it is highly mobile, meaning that labor can move from one point or from one place to another, either from one occupation to another, or from one industry to another, or from one geographical area to another. That is what we refer to as what? Industrial, occupational, and geographical mobility of labor. So labor is highly mobile, which means it can move at any time. The next one is that it involves human ability, meaning that it is just the factor of production that is majorly human in nature. The next one, ownership cannot be separated from skill. In that, we say that labor, skill, and the owner of labor, they are what? They are the same thing. A human being that is an accountant, his skill goes under with him, and his skill remains with him. The next one is that the reward for labor is wages or salaries. Now, in some other cases, there could be some other kind of remarks that you hear. The price for labor. The reward for labor can either be wages or salaries, but the price of labor is wages. Now, moving down from there, we have the next factor of production. The next factor of production here, we have capital. Capital has been defined as any man-made wealth that is set aside for production of further wealth. Meaning that other things that you want to produce, those things that are man-made which you invest in producing other things, they are referred to as capital. Capital in economics looks at different items, provided they are things that can be used to produce other things, then they are referred to as capital. That is different from the accountant's view that capital, or the layman's view that capital is whatever you use, or the initial outlay, investment or cash outlay of a firm or a business is its capital. But in economics and in production, anything that is used, whether machines, cars, raw materials that is used in production, then refer to it as capital. Now, capital has types of capital. Types of capital. Now, capital could be, we have the fixed capital. We have the circulating capital, we have the social capital, we have the current capital. This is as it relates to production. Now, fixed capital talks about a type of capital which does not change in both value and volume and form as the production process progresses, or as the production stages of production progresses. That means it remains static in the short run, both in volume and in form. That means it cannot change from one form to other, and it doesn't change in size from one volume to another. Example of things we could call fixed capital, we have the factory space or machinery could be referred to as fixed capital. The premises of production, which it could be your factory. Vehicles or motor van, as would be generally referred to, motor van, and so on and so forth. So these are things that you would now refer to in what? In your fixed capital. Now the second part of it, the second type of capital, we have the circulating capital. The circulating capital talks about the type of capital which is variable in nature. That means it can move, it can change in both volume and form as the production process is changing, or as the production process progresses. For instance, raw materials, that is circulating capital. You have raw materials and share investments. Investment is in the form of money, while raw materials, definitely with investment outlays of a firm, it buys raw materials. Raw materials get to be processed to become finished goods. Then the finished goods are sold off in the market to become money, and when money is pulled back into the business, it still turns back to investment. So now you see it completes a particular cycle. The investment will also change to raw materials. Raw materials will become finished goods. Finished goods will be sold to become money, and the cycle never ends. That is why we call it what? Circulating capital. The next one is social capital, which is the capital made available by the government to aid in the form of good roads and other social amenities to encourage production. Now, in that case, production here is encouraged by the government, not by directly investing in the production process, but making those things available so that the processes can be facilitated. The production process and distribution can be facilitated. Now, the things, of course, the things you could call social capital, like I said, good roads, well-structured markets, infrastructure, storage facilities, and so on. The next part of it, you have what? Current capital. Current capital refers to capital that is made available for the day-to-day operations or the day-to-day running of an organization or of the production process. Now, the current capital here is also the same thing as the working capital. The current capital could be referred to as the working capital. Now, the working capital, of course, in accounting terms, we say is what? The excess of current assets to current liabilities. That meaning that the things that current capital could be used for, things like payment of salaries, purchase of stationery, payment of rates, and so on and so forth. Those things are used for those money that is reserved for day-to-day operations, day-to-day running, making sure that things are moving on, is referred to as the current capital. Now, looking at some little characteristics of capital now. Characteristics of capital. Now, looking at characteristics of capital, we are looking at what are the things that actually makes us recognize capital. First of all, is that capital is man-made. Of course, if it's man-made, then what? It has a cost of production. It exists as intermediate goods. Then capital may be fixed or variable. The fourth one, the reward for capital is interest. The reward for capital is interest. Now, these are the things that we could that could actually give us an idea what capital is all about. Anything that is man-made wealth, from the definition we said capital is man-made wealth that is set aside for production of further wealth or for production of other wealth, goods and services. That means it is man-made. It is not natural. It is not given by nature. The next one is that it has a cost of production. Definitely, since it is made, there's a cost or things that are put into it that makes it come into existence. You spend something to bring it into existence. The next one is that it exists as what? Intermediate goods, which means many of them, things you refer to as capital, are not finished goods. They are unfinished goods. That is why you can actually combine them to produce other goods. And the next one is that it may be fixed or variable, like from the thing we discussed moments ago, that we have fixed and circulating capitals. That means that some kinds of capital could actually be fixed, some could change in nature. And the other one is that the reward for capital is interest. Interest could be anything on your share investment and so on and so forth. Now, the next and the last on the list of factors of production is entrepreneur. Now, the entrepreneur as a factor of production is that factor or that element which actually organizes and brings together other factors of production. It is argued in most cases that entrepreneur should not be separated from labor, but in the actual sense, the entrepreneur is also a human factor, but organizes other things. The laborer is just someone that earns wages or salaries, but the entrepreneur is the person that is the brain behind the production. Now, the entrepreneur, because of its nature, it performs certain functions. But after performing these functions, it stands a chance of either producing a profit after the process of production or incurring a loss. So his reward, if positive, is definitely profit. Now, what we now need to know is the function. What are the functions of the entrepreneur? The entrepreneur, what are the functions? What are the functions of the entrepreneur? Number one is that he organizes other factors of production. Two, it determines the nature and the form of production output. Three, the entrepreneur coordinates the production process. Four, it undertakes all the risks involved in production. Next one, the last one, is that the reward is profit. All us. Now, because he's the brain behind the production process, he now organizes other factors of production, makes sure that they are all present and combined in the right proportion for production. Then he determines the nature and form of production output. That is what comes out, what will be the nature of the final product or the finished product that will be served to the consumers. He determines what the quality and the nature would be. Now, the third one, we have that the entrepreneur coordinates the production process, which means that even as he continues to combine, he makes sure that efficiency and output is ensured. The next one is that it undertakes all the risks involved in production, because he's the one that brings in the capital, he's the one that mobilizes the labor, he's the one that makes sure that determines where and when to produce. And definitely, when the other tertiary processes are involved, he makes sure and fashions out systems. For instance, marketing and distribution, he must make sure that he makes a good distribution channel, else whatever his production activities would be will earn him a loss. But when he's efficient and when he's active, he earns a profit. Now, that is for the factors or agents of production. The next part we'll take a look at which is on our which is on our outline. After factors of production, we have the concept of total average and marginal productivity. Now, the question before we get there is, in production, there are things you call input and output. Now, production input talks about the raw material, the factors, the requirements, the materials you invest into production, land, labor, capital. But the output talks about the productivity, the volume of things that have been brought out by the factors that were put in there. Now, in any case, talking about that, what are the things that actually determine the volume of output or the volume of production. So we take a look at what? Factors. Before we go further, factors that determine the volume of production. Factors that determine the volume of production. First of all, the thing that would actually make volume of production high is availability of raw materials. Then we talk about quantity and quality of factors. Quantity and quality of factors. 3, the size of the market. 4, government policy. 5, the nature of the product involved. 6, we talk about the scale and okay. Materials, let's use that. Okay. Now, okay, level of technology. Now, looking at these things are the things that we talk of when we look at what? When we look at factors that determine the volume of production. Availability of raw materials, that is when those inputs, the raw materials generally here refer to the production inputs. The production inputs here looks at all the factors of production. How well are they available? If they are available, then in what quantity and what are the quality? The quantity talks about will determine your scale of production, but the quality will determine how efficient they become. Quantity will make factors of production effective because probably they are going to you meet up the required output within the specified time. But the quality determines the efficiency, how well they will work, how well the resources or time things can be saved but still maintain the same level of output. Now, from there, we take a look at the size of the market. The size of the market talks about the extent of the demand. The extent of the demand determines the supply or the volume of production that will be produced or supplied to the market to satisfy the demand. Where demand is high for something, for a product or a commodity, then it is required or evident or it is pertinent that the producer must produce or supply higher quantity or higher volumes. You produce higher volumes, but on the other hand, you have to produce lower volumes. Then size of the market. Okay, no, that was where we just. Then government policy as it relates to a particular product. The government policy may actually either hamper or promote the production of something, of a commodity or product, where it favors it. Where it is not favoring, then they will have low production. Now, nature of the product. Nature of the product. There are certainly certain kinds of products and services that cannot be produced on large quantities or large volumes, while certain others can fluctuate. Now, a tailor, a local tailor, can only make clothes for those that actually order for them. That means he will always remain at a small scale. The volume will not be so much. But at the time where you are a fashion designer, you are in the big leagues, then you could talk about producing and supplying to places like boutiques, definitely at various sizes, that definitely will make your output, the volume of output, higher. Then the next one is what? Level of technology. The technology of production will actually talk about the level of application or division of labor, which might be the next one. But the technology talks about the know-how. What do you actually know? How do you know how to do these things? So if the technology is high, if there's high level of technology, then volume of output will be what? Will be higher, because there would be better ways of doing things, better ways of producing those things, and eventually leading to higher volume of output. Of course, the reverse is the case, where there's low level of technological development. Now, that leads us to the next part. That leads us to the next part on the outline, which is the concept of total average and marginal product. Total average and marginal product concepts. Now, when we are looking at that, the total average and marginal products, like we said, output is what we used to refer to products here. That is, but here they are talking about the total product, which is the total volume of output produced from the combination of inputs into a given quantity of inputs or level of inputs into production. Whatever all the inputs can produce is referred to as total product. Now, on the other hand, the average product talks about the production per unit, that's productivity per unit. The units, the production, the quantity or volume which a unit of product produces, which a unit of input produces, is referred to as the average product. And average product, definitely, average product is equal to, as AP is equal to total product by units of input. So in other words, TP over Q equals average product. On the other hand, the third one, which is the marginal product. Marginal product refers to the extra or additional outputs generated, the additional or extra outputs generated by an additional input introduced into the production process. That is, the extra unit of output produced by the introduction of an extra unit of input. That is what we refer to as marginal product. And marginal product MP is equal to change in total product divided by change in units of inputs. That is, we have TP2 minus TP1 divided by Q2 less Q1. Now, these things, these concepts are related in one way or another and actually determine the stages of production. For instance, when we talk about the total product, average product, and marginal product, there is a point where the marginal product will get to, and it is unwise to increase your scale of production. The scale of production, before we get there, refers to the quantity or the volume of input that is invested into production. So, in other words, it refers to what? Increase in volume of input. Now, these concepts we are talking about here, concepts of total, average, and marginal utility, let us see how they relate with each other. For instance, the first one, at the first point, the total product is increasing. Of course, it increases and definitely it is higher than every other concept there. It is higher than average product and it's higher than marginal product. But at a point, the marginal product measures the rate of increase in total product. Hence, it tells us the rate at which total product is increasing. Now, at the initial stage of production, when production scale is still expanding, what happens? The total product is higher than all the other ones. These things will still be explained with the help of a graph. Then the next one, after a while, the average product rises above the marginal product at the maximum point. That means average marginal product gets to a particular maximum where average product now becomes higher than marginal product. But still, it means at that maximum point of the marginal product, it is regarded that the total product increases at a constant rate. That means there is constant returns when marginal product is equal to 0. But when it is still increasing, when marginal product is still increasing, total product increases at an increasing rate, meaning that there is increasing returns. Now, over there, after the second point, then marginal product nosedives down. That means it decreases to, at the point where it is decreasing, average product is higher than marginal product. But total product increases at now a decreasing rate, which means that there is now diminishing marginal returns. This process, if scale of production continues expanding, marginal products will fall to a point of 0, where total product gets to the maximum. In other words, it reaches a turning point. Now, beyond that point, marginal product becomes negative, and that means that the total product starts diminishing, and that is where we have diminishing total returns. Now, a production schedule, we would try to complete the columns for the average product and marginal product. From what we've discussed, that average product is the output per unit of input. That means we said that anytime we are to calculate average product, we divide total product by the quantity of input. Now, the number of workers here are the variable factors. Now, over here, the first one will be 8 divided by 1. That is 8 divided by 1 to give us 8 units. And the next one would be 14 divided by 2. 14 divided by 2 gives us 7. And the third one, 27 divided by 3 gives us 9. Gives us 9 units. The fourth one will be 10. The fifth one, 35. That's total product divided by whatever here, divided by the number of workers. 35 here, in this case, divided by 5. We've got 7. The next one, 30 divided by 6, we have 5. Then the next one, 28 divided by 7 is 4. That's the column for average product. Now, for marginal product, MP, we said it is change in total product by change in quantity of workers or number of workers, quantity of variable input. Now, over here, I've got the marginal product. The total product here is 8, and definitely at the first point we have 8 minus 0 over 1 minus 0. What do we have? Definitely we have 8 over 1, which is 8. Alright, so which means I still have 8 here. Now the second part of it, all of them started at the same point. Now the second part of it, we have for the second part, MP for this is at 1, at 2, MP will be 14 minus 8 divided by 2 minus 1, and that is 6. So we have 6 over here. Then 3, we have MP equals 27 less minus 14 by 3 minus 2, that is 13. So we have 13 here. The fourth one, we have at 4, MP equals 40 less 27 divided by 4 minus 3. That leaves us with 13 as well. At 5, MP equals at 5 MP equals 35 minus 40 divided by 3. Minus 2. So I divide by 5 minus 4. That means 35 minus 40, I have minus 5. So here will be 13 and minus 5. Just like that, we could actually, since the changes here are 1 to each other, we would have 30 minus 40 minus 35 minus 40, I have minus 5. This one is also minus 5. From the calculations, we have a table of this sort, which definitely we could convert, we could draw on the same axis to represent the relationship between average product, marginal product, and total product. Now, having something like that, I have this. Here would be the output. Here will be the number of workers, which is the input. The highest number of worker output we have there is 70, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and 70. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Now from here, if we decide to graph them, at first number of workers, I have total product first, 8. The second one, 14. Third one, 24. Four, 40. 5, 54. 6, 64. 7, 64. So I have, okay, then for this is for total product. For the average product we have, okay, oh, is 8, 10, 4 is 5, 10.8, 64 is. Graphing out the tables, the values on the table, we have something that looks like this. That is the graph. From what we explained earlier, that at the maximum point of the marginal product, that there is constant returns to scale, and the average product is still below the marginal product. But when marginal product is declining, the average product goes higher to a maximum point, and it's higher than that. But at this point where you have maximum TP, that is where the marginal product is at the minimum, that is 0.0. Now after this 0.0, what happens is that total product continues to drop, and that makes for the thing we call law of diminishing returns. This thing can also be used to explain diminishing returns. But before we go on, at the first instance, the first point where we have here, this is the stage 1 of production. At stage 1, where you can still increase the scale of production, average total product is higher, of course. Average product is higher than marginal product. But in stage 2, marginal product is higher and gets to a maximum. At the point where total product increases at a constant scale, there's now constant returns to scale. There is still increase in total output in stage 2, which means you can still increase the volume of production. Then at stage 3, which is this place, at stage 3 of production, now what is happening is that there is diminishing marginal returns, which means that the rate of increase in total product is actually reducing, and at the end of the whole thing, total product now gets to a maximum. At that point, marginal product is now 0. Now, what happens is that firms cannot no longer, beyond this point, they can no longer increase the scale of production in favor of the input. Reason is that once they increase this, the next stage will be a drop in total output. Now, that is talking about the concept of total, average, and marginal productivity. The next point we look at is the scale of production and returns to scale. The next point of call on our outline is the scale of production and returns to scale. Now, this, by the time we talk about scale of production is defined as the quantity or the volume of input which is combined into production to give a given volume of output. So which means the level of input is what we refer to as the scale of production. Now, when we are looking at that, of course, that means we have the what? The large scale production and what? The small scale production. For large scale production, it means there is high level, the basis of operation, the quantity of inputs or resources being used are actually of huge values or of huge quantities. Definitely it means there is the use of machines, and definitely most cases the output is higher in a large scale production than in a small scale production. But the ratio of increase does not mean that someone producing on a large scale will have higher returns proportionally than those that are on a small scale. But quantity wise, the large scale producer has higher output than the small scale producer. Definitely, it means definitely that for large scale there's high volume of output. It encourages use of machinery, specialized activities, encourages division of labor. But in the case of the small scale production definitely means that the quantity of output is small. Definitely means that the quantity of inputs rather, is small. The input that brings a certain level of output talks about what is small. That is why we call it the small scale production. And because of that, the basis of operation is little. The quantity of output is smaller compared to the large scale production. Now, because of that, it makes use of limited resources. It makes use of limited technology that it won't be, the rate of production will not be as high as those in the large scale. Definitely because the basis, the volume of input we are using is not so much. So in other words, what we are processing are not so high in volume, and definitely it might not need the specialized machines and some things like that. So in other words, those are differences between large scale and small scale. And even in small scale, some other times in small scale some other times there could be the crude production processes could be involved. So in other words, you could be producing at an unrefined environment. Now, that is difference between large scale and small scale production. Now, the next one we talk about is what? Returns to scale. Now, before we talk about production returns, we talk about period of production. Period of production. In economics, we recognize two things. We have the short-run production period and you have the long-run production period. Now, we'll take a look at these things. Now, for the short-run production period, what we are looking at is certain characteristics and length or stage of production, and the nature of the inputs at those stages. Now, in the short run period of production, we are talking about a period of production where there exists at least one fixed factor of production. That means at least one fixed factor will not vary with output, but other factors can vary with output. Now, in certain small or firms that operate within the short run period, you will notice that there's a fixed premises. There's a fixed number of machines over time. There is a fixed quantity of workers, and possibly the variable thing there would be the capital. Now, where the capital is varying, then capital becomes the variable factor and some other things, but there is at least one fixed factor. In some other cases, it could just be only the premises that is fixed and every other thing varies. But provided we have one fixed factor, we refer to that firm as operating within the short run period. Now, after a while, the firm, through expansion, graduates from one level or period of production to another. At that point, we say that the long run period is a period so long that the firm is unable to fix any variable. That means that the firm is able to vary all factors of production, all inputs. All production inputs vary. Now, in other words, production period, long run production period is a period of production which is characterized by no fixed factor. That means that all factors are variable. Now, in such cases, it means that in the short run period, the reason for increase in output or increase in volume of output is according to just what's it called? That is just because of a particular input that is varied. Now, when that input is varied, it means that the reason for change in output is just because of that varying proportion in the input. So now, that leads us to what we call variable proportions. Variable proportions. Now, variable proportions, still under this, just another topic under that. Variable proportions, like I just explained, is the proportionate change in the level of output resulting from a change in the variable input in the short run. The proportionate change in the level of output that results from a change in the quantity of the variable input in the short run. So in other words, that means that in the short run, when a variable factor changes, say labor changes, and there's the company or the organization experiences a change in output, then we are talking about variable proportions. Now, this thing now tells us that because certain factors are fixed, definitely those variable factors will wear out at a particular time. Now, if a factor varies, then that factor you are varying will wear out over time, then due to any kind of reason. Now, the next thing that will happen is that there is a pattern to which things will reduce, and that leads us to what we call law of variable proportions. The law of variable proportions is also referred to as the law of diminishing returns. The law of variable proportions is also referred to as the law of diminishing returns. Now, the law of variable proportions or the law of diminishing returns states that the more of a variable factor or a variable input is added to a fixed factor, that output increases to a particular point where further addition of that variable factor will lead to first a decrease in the marginal product, a decrease in the average product, and finally a decrease in the total product. That means it just tells us the manner or the rule or the way the diminishing returns will set in before it gets to diminishing total returns. First of all, the first product that will reduce is the marginal product. It will start falling. The one that will follow is the average product, and finally marginal product, total product. Now, so law of variable proportions and law of returns and returns to scale talks about change in output and the fashion of change or manner of change in output in the short run. So law of variable proportions only relates to the short run period of production. Now, moving down to the other one, the long run period leads us to what we call returns to scale. What we call returns to scale. We have said that scale of production is the change in the total output resulting from a proportionate change in the total input. That is returns to scale. But scale of production is just the volume of output that is used in production to produce a particular volume of input. Now, by the time we are now looking at the whole entire change that results from an increase in the entire scale of production, that is when we refer to returns to scale as proportionate increases between input and output in the long run refers to returns to scale. We can see the difference now, that variable proportion relates to the short run period while returns to scale relates to the long run period of production. Now, returns to scale is looking at how output increases or the percentage increase in output given a percentage increase in input. Now, and we have three of them. We have increasing returns to scale. That is the decreasing returns to scale. And there is the constant returns to scale. The percentage increase, when a percentage increase in the inputs yields a higher percentage increase in output, then there is increasing returns to scale. That is to say, when input increases by input is 100%, while output increases by 130%, then I'm talking about increasing returns to scale. But the reverse is the case when we have decreasing or diminishing returns to scale, meaning that input increases 100%, while output increases with something less than 100%, say 80%. Then we are talking about decreasing returns to scale. The last one is constant returns to scale. The constant returns to scale means that the same proportionate increase in input brings about the same proportionate increase in output, which means that if input increases by 100%, input 100%, output would increase by 100%. We call that constant returns to scale. The ratio of increase remains the same. So we have increasing returns to scale, decreasing returns to scale, and constant returns to scale. So the next point of call on the course outline will be production functions and factor combination. A production function is the quantitative relationship between the input and the quantity produced, that is the output. The input here is talking about the factors of production, which could be basically in the long run, capital and labor, while in the output, the output refers to the quantity produced. Now, over here, we look at the production function. Say quantitatively, Q is a function of labor, capital, and labor, where what K is capital, K is capital, L is labor. Now over here we have capital and labor. That means that whatever we produce will be a combination of capital and labor. Now this thing could be, when we see a production function in this form, it means that what both capital and labor are variable. So which means this production function is a long run production function. But on the other hand, when we have Q, it being a function of, say, labor, capital, either of them could be fixed. Labor could be fixed, capital could be variable. So, but whatever we see this bar on it, it means that factor is fixed. And we remember we said that in the short run there is at least one fixed factor. In this case, that means that this is a what? A short run production function. Now, but whichever one we decide to use, whichever case we are considering, production function just specifies the volume of output in relation to the input given, or in relation to the scale of production. Now, the production function we could have a linear types of production function. That's a production function. We mentioned one. We have the short run production function, which is what we have here. We have the long run production function. There's the linear production function. There is the constant elasticity production function. And last but not least, we have the Cobb-Douglas production function. So these are different forms of production function, which we will not be able to go through them in details, but each of these, I've explained each of this one. It will show us that a particular factor is fixed. This one is a variable. But whichever production function you decide to use, the most commonly used is the Cobb-Douglas. But whichever production function you decide to use, or that is involved, they all produce a particular curve. They all specify the scale of production. They all specify the level of output desired. Now, looking at the whole thing, looking at it from there, we now look at what are these things. If we are talking about production function, Then we should be looking at be able to analyze what guides the producer in making his decisions in production. Now, over here, the producer is able to vary the relationship, or is able to measure the rate at which he is able to substitute one factor for another, but bearing a particular scale of production or a particular level of output in mind. Now, that makes him produce what we call the Isoquant curve. So we have the Isoquant and the Isocost curves. Now, the Isoquant curve is defined as the locus of all combinations of labor and capital, that is inputs, that will yield the same level of output or the desired level or the same desired level of output for the producer. Now, the producer, what he is able to do is that he will vary quantities of labor, know what quantity of labor, vary both labor and capital at different levels. Now, at that point, he has not considered his physical capital investment. It is only possible investment. But he will still consider the feasible investment. The feasible boundary of investment is determined by the Isocost. The Isocost is a curve or a graph that shows the boundary or the limit of a firm's investment or a producer's investment outlay, showing what the quantity of the inputs he can actually and conveniently procure or employ, given the price, the unit prices of the inputs. Now, that's to say, the Isoquant there now is a locus, telling us possible scales of production. But Isocost tells us feasible scales of production. Now, over here, the Isoquant, which is here, now tells us, has certain characteristics. First off, number one, that it shows there's a significance of the Isocost, significance and features of Isocost. Okay, sorry, Isoquant I meant to say. It shows the desired level of output. Two, it demonstrates all possible input combinations. Three, it is negatively sloped. Four, the slope of Isoquant, the slope of Isoquant measures the marginal rate of technical substitution of one factor for the other, for unit of the other. So these are characteristics of the Isoquant curve. It involves all these things shows the desired level of output. The other one demonstrates the possible input combinations to give a particular desired level of output, while it is what? Negatively sloped. That's just the nature of it. The slope of that measures the marginal rate of technical substitution of one factor for the unit of the other. That means, for instance, capital labor tells us how many units of labor will be substituted for 1 unit of capital, and vice versa. Now, the Isoquant also determines the production technology. Now, by production technology, that is the ratio or method of combination of what? Labor and capital, or the inputs. In this case, the production technology here could either be capital intensive or labor intensive. Where is this capital intensive? It means that more capital or more machines are being used than labor. And when it is labor intensive, it means, of course, that it is labor deepening, which means that more labor is used than capital. Now, structure-wise, the Isoquant curve looks like this. Here becomes capital, and here labor. So this is the Isoquant. Now, on the other side of it, which is the what? The Isocost. The Isocost, now, like we defined it, like we defined the Isocost earlier on as a curve which actually shows the feasible or the practicable quantities of capital and labor that can be employed by a firm given its capital outlay, and the price, the unit price of the inputs. Now, moving on, earlier on we had mentioned that the price of labor is wages, while the price of capital is interest. Interest is price of capital, and price of labor is wages. Now, looking at these two, both of them are important in checking the Isocost. Now, the Isocost is also negatively sloped, just like the Isoquant, but unlike the Isoquant, which is here, it doesn't touch the x and y axis, but unlike the Isoquant, it touches the x and y axis. Now, the Isocost will look like this. Here will be labor, L, here is capital, K, meaning that I could employ A and B. A, if I concentrate all the resources we cannot employ more than A units of capital, and if we concentrate all resources, we cannot employ more than B units of labor. That means that we could actually combine any quantity here. Now, these two things have their slopes. Definitely, we said the slope of the Isocost, slope of Isocost equals the price ratio of inputs. So in this case, price of labor over price of capital over price of labor. Now, of course, price of labor we said is interest. Price of capital is wages. So interest over wages. Now, is the slope of this. But the slope of the isoquant which is what? The marginal rate of technical substitution, as we mentioned earlier, is change in quantity of capital divided by change in the quantity of labor. Change in capital, a change in labor. Now, in other words, now, by the time the producer is considering, he has to now lead to a point where he does what? He can combine factors optimally. And that point is where you call the optimum factor combination point. Now, at this optimum factor combination point, the optimum factor combination point is actually the point at which the producer gains the highest output per unit of his investment on a unit on each factor of production, on his inputs invested. So, but to arrive at that point, the producer, the firm, has to combine his Isoquant and Isocost. This is Isoquant, and here is a Isocost. So these two, by the time you combine it, this you'll be employing L of labor and K star of capital. Now, meaning that at this point is the point of what? Optimum factor combination point. That means when he combines this quantity of labor and capital, he actually meets his target of production now and achieves efficiency. That is what you talk of when you are talking about what? The factor combination, how the producer arrives at that. Now, the next point we look at, which is a topic on its own, talks about division of labor. Division of labor. Specialization and exchange. Now, division of labor, specialization and exchange. Division of labor here refers to the breaking down of production activities into different stages, with each stage manned or taken over, or activity taken over performed by individuals or separate individuals. Now, this means that everybody has a focus, decides to do on what to do, or specializes on one stage of production or the other. Now, over here, division of labor was actually first of all popularized by Adam Smith. Adam Smith, in his book Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith paid a visit to a pin making factory where he noted that there were 18 stages of making pin, and one person was doing everything. But afterwards, he actually concluded that if we had 18 persons that could take it, with each person taking over each stage of production, that definitely there will be increase in output. When he suggested it, the organization applied it, and from 20 pins per day, they produced 48,000 pins per day, and that was quite a remarkable thing. That is just because each person had to specialize on doing one thing and the other. What consumes time in production? You have setup times, you have downtimes due to changes from one place to another, movement, and so on and so forth. But with division of labor, those things are reduced. Now, Adam Smith, after his thing, now division of labor has become the bane or the key to successful large-scale production. Now, that means, but as good as it is, the division of labor has advantages and disadvantages. Advantages of division of labor. Advantage of division of labor, now have number one, time saving. Number two, reduction in unit costs. 3, increase in output. 4, encourages the use of technology. Technology. 5, use of technology. 5, it leads to specialization. 6, it creates employment opportunities. Now, these things, when we say time saving, that means the time for actually making making, like what we said the other time, the time it takes one person to make one pin by going through 18 stages, 18 persons can actually do it at the same time, and at that, lesser time is spent on a production activity than many that you have so many people, or that is divided into stages, than the one that is not. Now, over here, the second one, reduction in unit cost. This arises from increased volume or increased scale of production. Now, when division of labor is applied, then there is likely to be increased scale of production. And when scale of production is increased, then what happens is that higher output will be purchased, and definitely at discounted, higher inputs, pardon me, it will be purchased at definitely discounted rates. Increase in output, definitely, as so many people are concentrated on doing what they know how to do best, then they improve more ways of doing things, or better ways of doing things. Now, it encourages the use of technology. When the stages of production are actually segmented now, then it is possible to design machines or to improve a technology that could improve the use of each stage. Then you design a machine that will take over this stage and definitely do more than even a person would do. And second, next one, it leads to specialization. The more a person does an activity day in, day out, time and again, then it increases the skill of the person. and that means it now becomes something that will be, the person will be known for, and that is what is called specialization. It creates employment opportunities, definitely, because the stages of production are broken down. Definitely each segment or each division is now taken over by different people instead of one person doing everything. That is the set of advantages or division of labor, but we have also disadvantages. Disadvantages of division of labor. Now, first off, number one is that it makes work monotonous. Makes work monotonous. Two, it leads to loss of craftsmanship. Three, it can lead to unemployment. Four, increase in cost of production, in total cost. Now, with these, that division of labor makes work monotonous means definitely that when you continue, it makes work quite uninteresting. When you continue doing one thing time and again, it gets to a time where you become so bored with the job because there are no new challenges, no new thing to learn on the job. Then the next one leads to loss of craftsmanship, means that the creativity will be limited. Definitely you will just be an attendant of machines in the case of technologically driven systems, or in the case of non-technology driven systems, you are talking about the person just being knowing only one thing, and by the time you move up, then you will be losing your chances of employment, because imagine where someone all his life knows only how to bake, and at a time an opportunity comes up for a catering is cooking some things alongside, then what happens? Because the person specializes in such a thing, then what happens? He becomes unemployed, or that is, once there is any change, the person is not able to meet up. The last one is that increase in total cost of production. In that vein, we are looking at the total amount it involves in increasing the level of output. Definitely is going to be higher, and it will require more capital. Now, the next point, limitations of division of labor, is what are the things that will limit the application of division of labor in production or in industries. Now, definitely here, the limitations here, that is what will actually make you decide to apply division of labor and gain its benefits, or what are the things that will discourage you from actually deciding to apply it. Now, over here, one of the limitations, the first of them, you have what? The size of the market, or the extent of demand. That is what it means. Extent of demand. Then 2 is the nature of the product. 3, level of technological development. 4, we talk about availability of labor. 5, availability of storage facilities. 6, now when we talk about size of the market, we are talking about the people that will consume what you produce, and we know that division of labor actually brings about increase in volume of output. Then if the size of the market, if the people that need these things, whatever you are going to produce, the level is high, they are much, then the wise thing to do is to engage in division of labor so that your output can increase. But on the other case, the situation is the opposite. Then when the market is high, it encourages application of division of labor, but when it is not high or when it is low, it doesn't. The nature of the product means that some products do not actually need division of labor, because some products or some services need just to be done straight away. Now, the third one, you have what level of technological development. This would either lead to difficulties in the use of technology or encouraging. When there's high technological development, that means the division of labor could be applied favorably and conveniently. But in the case where technological development is low, then division of labor application will be slow or low. Then the last, availability of labor. In a case where we have a capital intensive system and we need increase in production, then we need definitely the labor to be available if we must need different people to man different posts. And the last one, availability of storage facilities, that is to encourage higher production and at the same time encourage the masses or the application of division of labor. Now that does it for that. And the last topic on this, or the next topic we look at, is economies of scale. Economies of scale. Economies of scale. Now, economies of scale talks about the advantages or the benefits or costs that firms derive either from each other in the firm or which an industry derives, whether internally or externally, by the increase in the scale of production. We know what scale of production is now. You can go back, if you go back to the previous study on scale of production to understand what it's all about. But when a firm increases scale of production, then it is able to actually have some benefits. Benefits could be in the form of publicity, it could be in the form of marketability, it could be in the form of research or anything. It could be from within or from without. Now, those are the things we call what? Economies of scale. Economies of scale, we have internal economies. We have external economies. Whichever one we decide to do, we have internal economies and diseconomies. While this one also we have external economies and external diseconomies. Now, let's look at this. When a firm derives a benefit from its activities when a firm is the advantages a firm derives from its from other firms, okay, the advantages and it enjoys from other firms as a result of increase in its volume of output, then we are talking about internal economies. But the disadvantages or costs it incurs as a result of increase in the level of output, refer to that as diseconomies. Now, diseconomies and economies, while economies are advantages or benefits, diseconomies talks about costs or disadvantages. Okay. Now, the next one, external economies or external diseconomies, talks about the benefits or disadvantages which a firm would derive. Which a firm would derive from other industries. Which an industry, that means it enjoys it externally from other industries. If once it is doing this, then it enjoys it from other firms and other industries, and that is what you refer to as external economies. But the costs or expenses is referred to as external diseconomies. Taking the first one, which is internal economies of scale. Generally, we have defined economies of scale as the costs and benefits which a firm derives from an increase in its volume of production. The increase in the volume of production we are talking about that is in the scale of production. Now, if he's able to do that, then definitely from small scale you increase to a large scale. So we said when these benefits or costs can come internally or externally. Now let's look at internal economies. Internal economies can be looked at from the point of reduction in unit costs. That is from its activities. Now, what does it enjoy? Then reduction in unit cost of production, that is one of them, and that is what we call what? Cost economies. Okay? Then we talk about expansion of markets. That's what we have, market economies. Then production economies. Research economies. Management economies or managerial economies, and so on. But now, when we look at it, for cost economies, we are talking about the firm being able to actually get for prices to be able to come down as a result of an increase in the volume of output. But expansion of market, that means that the market, the customers, the firm is able to reach out to more proportion of the market, that is more consumers than the smaller scale. Then production economies means that definitely because you are producing on a large scale, you should be able to have specializations. That means different sections in your production, you'll be able to meet up with the demand. Research economies, because the firm is large enough, it is able to specialize, have a department that will actually specialize in researching into ways of improving production or bringing out new markets for the organization. Then, talking about managerial economies, the firm is able to actually now sectionalize management and create different areas of specialization. And the last one, but not the least, you have the marketing economies. Marketing economies. The marketing economies is talking about the ability of the organization to be able to reach out to find, have a communication system between itself and the market and its customers, so that it will be able to meet their needs and anticipate the future needs, so that it will come up with new products and so on and so forth. Now, that is talking about the market, the internal economies. But internal diseconomies also occur. Internal diseconomies, we said, refers to all the costs or disadvantages that will accrue to a firm when it increases its volume of output. And these internal diseconomies here will talk about, of course, complexity in what? Management. 2, slow decision making. 3, inability of customers to meet the needs to the firm. Then increased cost of operation. Increased cost of operation or cost of production. These will serve as what? Internal diseconomies, because these are what the firm faces because it is increasing its volume or scale of production. Now we move down to the other one, the external economies and external diseconomies. Now, external economies, we say it is what? The advantages a firm enjoy from other firms as a result of an increase in its volume of output. So definitely external economies will occur in the form of publicity, in the form of financial economies. That means that it is able to access loans from corporate organization. It comes in the form of social responsibility, that's trust and goodwill from the other organizations. For external diseconomies, it can come in the form of negative publicities, and it could come in the form of propaganda. You know, certain publications could actually, when a firm is so large, then it becomes it becomes a kind of focal point for any media or newspaper or those kind of things. Then before you know it, anything that happens with the organization, even the government looks at the organization, because eventually they have to be publishing their accounts, because the larger you grow, the more demanding it becomes. You become a public liability company, which you definitely have to display your accounts to the government, and definitely you pay higher taxes. So all those things become external diseconomies of scale. Now, the next topic, production possibility curve. That's for short, you call it PPC. And now, the production possibility curve is also called a production. The other names you have production possibility frontier, production possibility boundary, or it is called production transformation curve. Now these are other names for the PPC, but what is actually the PPC? The production possibility curve is a curve showing the what? Showing the maximum quantity, or the combination of commodities or goods and services which a firm or an economy can actually come up with when the resources are fully employed and at the prevailing level of technology, which means that every other things are considered when we are talking about a production possibility curve. You consider full employment of resources, which means that both capital and labor are fully employed. And secondly, you also check the prevailing level of technology. That means that what is obtainable within the society as per combination of factors of production, efficiency, and everything. Now, the production possibility curve, as it is, looks like this, unlike the Isoquant that is convex to the curve and does not touch the origin. This is, let's say, good Y. Here is good X, meaning that definitely these two goods are competing with. They are the two competing commodities or goods at the top of your scale of preference. More of scale of preference, you can go to the study session on meaning and concept of economics. But here, when we talk about the scale of preference, that means these two things, good X and Y, are actually competing things there. Now, by the time what this means is that when we concentrate all our resources on the production of commodity X, we produce, say, 50. But when we concentrate on producing Y, we produce at maybe 80. So this is point A, and this could be point E. But definitely, there's no rule that restricts us from coming up with with a combination of both of them. Let's say we produce at point B or at point C. Now, what it means is that possibly I produce 70 of this at that point, and that means because I'm producing 70, I'm having 30 of this. Then I produce, say, 40, and I'm coming up with 45 of this. 40 here and 45 over there. Now what we can see is that there is, by the time because there is no expansion, there's no room for expansion of resources, not in this case. It means that as you decide to increase on the production of one, you must increase on the production of the other. That is the production possibility curve. Now, the production possibility curve relates to the concept of opportunity cost. You can use it to analyze the concept of opportunity cost. Now, it tells us what the units of one commodity that had to be foregone so that a particular quantity of the other commodity can be produced. Now, let's look at this. With this thing I have here, now, if we concentrate all on the production of A and the production of Y, we would produce 80 units and 0 of X, that is at point A. But for the fact that I decide at point B to produce 30 units of X, I had to forego. I had to now produce only 70 units of Y, meaning that I had to lose how many units? Of course, 10 units of Y. So in other words, the opportunity cost for producing 30 units of X is 10 units of Y that was lost. Now, at point C, now still looking at the whole thing, if I concentrate on producing only if I produce at point C, of which I now produce 45 units of X, I'm only able to come up with 40 units of Y. Definitely, it means that I had to forego 40 units, 80 minus 40, this space here. Okay, now that means the opportunity cost of producing 45 units of X is 40 units of X that was lost. But in this, if the question, or you are looking at the opportunity cost in terms of Y, then the opportunity cost of producing 40 units of Y is just 5 units of X that was lost. Now you could actually conclude on that. Now, more on this. PPC, okay, significance of the PPC. First things, PPC relates to the concept of opportunity costs. That means we could use it to analyze the concept of opportunity cost. So that is what we have just explained. Now, 2, PPC illustrates the position of employment in the economy. Now, let's say we have this. If this is A, B, C, and D, all of them are on the line. Then I have a point E and F. Now, every point on the production possibility curve indicates that resources are fully employed. So, which means points A, B, C, and D implies what? Full employment. Employment of resources implies full employment. Now, the other one, but every point inside the production possibility curve, say point E, represents underemployment. Or unemployment of resources. Definitely, when resources are unemployed or underemployed, definitely the economy will not be producing at the point where it is supposed to. Then for F, at point F, means the what? Unattainable level of production. Unattainable level of production. Now these are the significances of the point. That is how it illustrates full employment, underemployment, and a case of what? Forecast level of production. Now, the third and final of this is that it indicates economic growth and the causes of the growth. Now, PPC shows economic growth when there's a shift of the PPC. So the economic growth is indicated by an outward shift of the production possibility curve like this. Let's say I have this. So here this is the PPC, and it moves from point 1 to point 2. Then there's an economic growth. But now, economic growth could be, of course, as a result of either an increase in the production capacity of the economy, or it could be as a result of improvement in the technology which may favor one of the commodities or not. Of course, it could be commodity X or commodity Y. Now, if I have this in this figure, I have this. Of course, there's an expansion in the production capacity, but it is only favoring commodity X in this case, in this figure here, figure 2 or 1. For the second figure here, there's also an there's a growth, but it is linked to one side, it is tipped to one side, and of course that is as a result of increase in technology, the production of this. It could also be this, it could also be this, towards one side, but definitely what we should note is that economic growth comes up as a result of either increase in technology or increase in the production capacity of the available resources or inputs in the economy. Now, at this point, this is the end of the study session made up of different topics in the theory of production. You will be having questions scrolling up on your screen. You take a look at the whole questions, try to attempt them. In a case where you have issues, go back to the tape.